Hello, and welcome to Part 2 of Class 2 on Regulations. Warren County Community College's Small Unmanned Aircraft System Drone Program will present to you an overview of regulations concerning drones. In this section, we have gone over acronyms and terminology. Today, we will go over drone regulations, and in our next video, we'll go over drones, the FAA, and the laws, federal and state. Again, what we will cover today are drone regulations and overview. In this video, at times we will offer you sample questions. These questions may or may not be similar to the ones you see on the FAA Part 107 test. If you accept football tickets in exchange for using your small unmanned aircraft system or drone to videotape a future construction site, what FAA regulation is this operation subject to following? And the answer is 14 CFR Part 107, more commonly referred to as Part 107. These are the commercial operation of drones. You have accepted compensation in the form of football tickets. Therefore, you must be a licensed pilot under Part 107 in order to not violate FAA regulations. If you plan to use a 33-pound drone to capture aerial imagery over real estate for use in sales listings, what FAA regulation is this operation subject to? And again, it is 14 CFR Part 107. When you're reading a question like this, remember, Part 107 covers any registered drone operation between 0.55 pounds and 55 pounds. So if it's over 0.55, we're about roughly a little more than half a pound, we're under 55 pounds, then that drone used for commercial purposes would be subject to Part 107. Any drone under 55 pounds used in a Part 107 operation should be registered for best practices. The secret here is, or the key here is rather, that you are doing a real estate job. This would be a job for compensation. This is a commercial operation. Therefore, it must fall under Part 107. Now, according to 14 CFR Part 107, an sUAS is an unmanned aircraft system weighing how much? Less than 55 pounds. So between 0.55 pounds and less than 55 pounds. These are the two numbers you want to remember when talking about Part 107 aircraft. If you want to become a remote pilot under Part 107, you must be at least 16 years old. The age for registering a drone is 13. So there is one of the questions where they'll try to trick you because it'll say both 13 and 16. So you need to memorize Part 107, 16, registering a drone, 13 years old. You need to be able to read, write, speak, and understand English. There can be exceptions made for the American with Disabilities Act, but for the most part, you will need to understand and take this test in English. It is not available in other languages. You must be in a physical and mental condition to safely operate your sUAS, and you certify yourself. Pass an initial aeronautical knowledge exam at an FAA-approved knowledge testing center. In other words, you need to pass your Part 107 certification and get your pilot's license. An sUAS operation may involve a single person or an entire crew of people. Drone crew roles include, and these are ever expanding, but traditionally, and what you'll find on the test is the remote pick. This is the pilot in command. If it's a Part 107 operation, this person must be licensed and must have passed their aeronautical information test. You only need that person to fly drones legally, but you may have someone on your crew who is the person manipulating the controls. They could be the ones actually flying the drone and holding the remote control as long as they're under the direct supervision of a licensed pilot or a remote pick, as we would term them. And then the third common crew member might be a visual observer. You can have multiple visual observers. You may also see security personnel, air bosses, or other terms. But for the test, you need to know these three terms: the remote pick, the person manipulating the controls, and the visual observer. We must remember that there is a definition for unmanned aircraft. An unmanned aircraft is defined as a device or an aircraft or a drone that is operated without the possibility of direct human intervention from within or on the aircraft. You will be on the ground as a remote pick. The aircraft will be in the sky. If something goes wrong, you cannot have human intervention within. And if we think of a small quadcopter, it's impossible for a human to be on board. There are certain privileges that remote pilots get once passing the test. A remote pilot in command must be designated before each and every flight, and a flight is defined every time the drone takes off. It can change during a flight. There can be two remote picks, and one can release command to the other remote pick. If they're both remote picks, they both must have a license, but there can only be one remote pilot in command at a time. The small UAS operator manipulating the controls of a drone should always avoid manned aircraft and never operate in a careless or reckless manner. You must keep your drone within line of sight, your visual line of sight. You need to remember this: no careless, no reckless flying, be professional, and you always keep that drone in your visual line of sight. You can fly during daylight or in twilight, 30 minutes before official sunrise to 30 minutes after official sunset, local time. If you are in the twilight time, you must have appropriate anti-collision lighting. You may also get a waiver to fly at night. The maximum allowable altitude is 400 feet above the ground, and higher if your drone remains within 400 feet radius of a structure. You can go 400, let's take the example of a cell tower. If you were monitoring the top of a cell tower that was 100 feet in the air, you could take your drone to 500 feet, 400 feet above the top of the structure, as long as you remained within a 400-foot radius of that tower or that structure. The maximum speed for drone flights is 100 miles per hour or 87 knots. On questions on your prep test and questions on the FAA test, these numbers will be interchangeable from time to time. They are the equivalent. You can't fly a small UAS over anyone who is not directly participating in the operation, not under a covered structure, or not inside a covered stationary vehicle. So it is illegal to fly your drone over people unless they are a member of your crew. That is what they mean by directly participating in the operation. A lot of times in the early days, if there were wedding videographers that used drones, they would fly over the couple being married. That is technically illegal under FAA regulations in Part 107. You must remain away from individuals. The exceptions would be, for instance, from our previous slide, the remote pick, the person manipulating the controls, or the visual observer. No other people can be flown over without a waiver. There are no operations from a moving vehicle unless you are flying over a sparsely populated area. Remember, you cannot be the driver of the vehicle and the pilot of the drone. Someone else must be driving the vehicle. A common example of drones flying from a moving vehicle are drone flights from boats. Operations in Class G airspace are allowed without air traffic control permission. Class G airspace is open airspace that ranges in altitude. Normally, Class G goes from the ground to 700 or 1,200 feet. There are some exceptions. Operations in Class B, C, D, and E airspace will require air traffic control approval. You can gain those approvals now through the LANCE system almost immediately, but that will not appear on your test. You will learn more about this in a later section. You cannot fly in Class A because Class A is 18,000 feet, mean sea level, and above. So you will never fly your drone in Class A. There have been people who have tried. That is a violation of the law. You can carry an external load if it is securely attached and does not adversely affect the flight characteristics or controllability of the aircraft. So you may tie something like a water balloon, a t-shirt, but you must make sure that it does not adversely affect flight characteristics and that you can control the aircraft. You cannot carry some things. A lithium battery, extra lithium battery on your drone would be an example. That can only be carried as the power source. You may also transfer property for compensation or hire within state boundaries, provided the drone, including its attached systems, payload, and cargo, weighs less than 55 pounds total, and you obey all other flight rules. So if you want to do a delivery, you can get out of your car at the end of someone's driveway, put your pizza on your drone, and fly it to their door, but you cannot fly over state lines to do this, and you cannot be outside of the visual line of sight without a proper waiver. To operate the controls of a small unmanned aircraft system under Part 107, you need a remote pilot airman certificate with a small UAS rating, or be under the direct supervision of a person who holds such a certificate. The purpose of this class is to get you prepared to take the test to become a Part 107 pilot. You are responsible as the drone pilot for ensuring the drone is safe before flying, but the FAA does not require small UAS to comply with the current agency airworthiness standards or obtain aircraft certification. Those are done at great expense to large aircraft. Drones are plastic, they are small, they are mass manufactured, so there is no airworthiness standard or aircraft certification at this time. That makes the onus on the remote pilot in command, who is responsible to do pre-flight checklists and make sure that the aircraft is airworthy before launching it into the sky. Instead, you will simply perform that pre-flight visual and operational check of the UAS to ensure that safety pertinent systems are functioning properly. Do your control check. Make sure your drone is operating as it is supposed to with your remote control. Check the communication links, the controls between the control station and the UAS, and always ensure that your small unmanned aircraft system is registered with the FAA and that the registration sticker appears on the outside of the drone. The FAA strongly encourages all pilots to check local and state laws before gathering information through remote sensing technology or photography. Be aware, there are local areas and states that have passed additional drone regulations, often to protect the privacy of people. As part of a privacy education campaign, the FAA will provide all drone users with recommended privacy guidelines as part of the UAS registration process and through the FAA's Before You Fly mobile application that can be downloaded on either iOS, Apple, or Android devices. Ensure that the operation poses no undue hazard to people, aircraft, or property in the event of loss of control of the aircraft for any reason. Please keep in mind that you will want to make sure that you do a survey of the place you are going to fly a mission and that it is completely safe and you have mitigated all risks. You, as the remote pilot in command, once passing the FAA test, are responsible. You must make your drone available to the FAA for inspection or testing upon request, and you must provide any associated records required to be kept under the rule of Part 107. Maintenance records, flight logs, etc. may be requested by the FAA. You must report to the FAA within 10 days any operation that results in serious injury, loss of consciousness, or property damage to property other than the UAS of at least $500. If you damage your drone and there is no other damage, no one is injured, there is no loss of consciousness, but the drone was $1,500, that is not reported to the FAA. It is only property other than the drone itself. Basically, you operate your drone to ensure compliance with all the applicable provisions and regulations of Part 107. Another test question that you should hope you get is how many drones can a pick fly at one time? And the answer currently is 1. Each remote pick may only fly 1 drone at a time unless special permission has been granted by the FAA. This ends part 2 of our section on drone regulations and has been presented to you by Warren County Community College. Thank you.